Hello and welcome back guys. Today we are going to start new story, Attack on Titan, Rise to Heroism, written by Anthony Tyler 9. So let's begin. You know the one thing about those with power in a world filled with superpowers. The saying that power corrupts, is really telling. A young man's voice is heard as we find ourselves within a small park. There is a small boy with black hair with green highlights as he stands in front of another boy who is holding his left arm in a maroon shirt. Stop it Kaken. Why you're hurting him? The boy called out, as the boy named Kaken walked over. You wanna pretend to be a hero? You don't stand a chance without a quirk Deku. Kaken said, as he slammed his fist into his palm causing a small explosion. It was terrifying to a smaller boy like this Deku child as he stood back with his arms out and tears brimming to the surface of his eyes. It was mere moments later in the slowly burning sun as the boy he protected was sniffling behind him that Deku stared into the sky with scuff marks on his clothes and body. There is a sad truth about the world of quirks: all men are not created equal. And it is because of this exact moment, that I had trained myself in mind only to become a hero just like All Might. A much taller boy who bore the same resemblance to the defeated child on the ground ran through an alleyway, about 6 years later. As the young man is running through the alleyway, he finds himself at an impasse as there is no way to escape from his pursuers. Turning around he finds a 10-year-old Kaken as well as 10-year-old lackeys behind him as they stalk their way over to the trembling boy. Ah, what's this? Deku is trembling before me. Well, you should have never stated those words against me earlier today to make me want you dead. The boy said, as he revealed himself to be 6 years older Kaken. As the boy charged his quirk he glared harshly at Deku as the boy prepared himself completely for a new fight to come about. The boy was not incredibly athletic as he pulled his arms up as he prepared for the beatdown to begin, and as soon as his former friends come at him they use their quirks in order to beat him into SBMSN. He is able to defeat the two lackeys, but it comes at the cost of taking his eyes off of the main threat of the bunch, the literal human with the power of a grenade, and possibly a nuke all within his hands. As he is sent flying back into the wall at the end of the alleyway, his head smacks the bricks behind him as his vision swims. Stumbling to stand back up, he finds himself getting into a stance that will protect his inner body as well as head. Well Deku, you managed to defeat my lackeys. Well, you won't be capable of defeating me, so how about you listen to me for once and stop trying to become a hero? Bakugo cried out, as he launched his final attack on Izuku. The sounds of pain-filled cries as well as small explosions were heard by the people on the street before they moved on with their days. Just thinking it was a gang member showing someone their place to not step into their territory. After Bakugo gets his allies and leaves Izuku in the alleyway, the young man could only groan in pain as he felt his entire body in pain as he remembers the first time he ever saw a hero in action and wanted to become one. But it was on that very same day that his dreams were crushed by the very mother who had been overly kind to him. He's always smiling. No matter how bad things get. Do you think I can be a hero too? A younger Izuku asked his mother as the young woman held her hands over her mouth as she approached her son. As she ran to him and pulled him into a hug, she cried into her son's shoulder as she blamed herself for not being capable of giving him a quirk. And she apologizes for everything that went wrong, and what will go wrong in the future of the boy's life. Izuku groans a bit more as he pulls himself from the ground as he walks out of the alleyway. He shakes his head as he looks at the time. However, unlike so many universes where he was capable of leaving this alleyway with his life intact and return home to a mother who worries about him, this time he won't be as lucky. As soon as the young man leaves the small alley, he finds himself face to face with a tall man who looks like he hit the gym and never missed leg day. Hey there SQR. I heard from some kids down the way that you're quirkless, is that true? The man asked, as a sick smile came to his face. Izuku, who was completely taken aback by the man's seemingly kind nature but knew that the man's face was anything but nice, had taken a few steps back. Stay back. I have pea pepper spray. Izuku called out as he moved back into the alley. Ah, how cute, he thinks he can hurt me because he's quirkless. It's people like you that I despise the most. Time to end your pitiful existence. The man called out, as he ran after Izuku. The young man, who was admittedly still weak after his beatdown from Bakugo earlier that day, had struggled in the man's arms as the man had tried to kill him with strangulation. It was terrifying for the young man as he tried to reach for something to help himself, and with a little bit of luck he was capable of grabbing a pencil he had that had fallen out conveniently out of his backpack as he grabbed it and stabbed it into the man's left eye. As the man cried out in pain before pulling the pencil out of his eye, he looked at Izuku as the boy struggled to get some air back into his lungs after being strangled. "Well, you are just as vicious as that brat stated, no matter. My quirk will make sure that you are erased from our world itself. You won't be remembered, brat," the man said, activating his quirk. It was here that Izuku felt the ground beneath himself disappear as he fell into the ground as if he was in a cartoon. As he fell down the seemingly never-ending hole, he never noticed how he was slowly approaching the ground of a different world. And it was here that he felt his entire body become inflamed as he slowly passed out in the portal as he was spat out and smacked a wall on the other side. Once the portal closed, the young man was left into the world he was placed in as the sky was reaching the near end of the day. It was when he heard thumping in the world that stirred him from his slumber, and he immediately got up from the ground to look at his surroundings. Looking to the sky above himself, he found a very tall human looking down at him with a sickening smile on its face. "You sir, why you couldn't inform me as to where I am, right?" Izuku asked, in Japanese. And as soon as the hand comes moving towards him, Izuku gets the strange feeling to run away, and as soon as he notices how the smile seems to deepen as the monster tried to grab him, he moved out of the way. Where am I? What is going on? Izuku called out in Japanese once more as he ran through the streets. As he ran through the streets, he came across two children who were trying their very best to lift a beam of wood from whoever was trapped beneath. And as soon as he tried to move over to them, he heard the telltale stomps of the monster that was chasing him over in this direction. Running over to the two who were struggling on lifting the wooden beam, he lightly tapped the girl on the shoulder as he motioned that he would help them as much as he could. So as the trio were attempting to lift the wooden beam, they managed to lift it a little bit as the woman underneath managed to struggle to pull herself out of the beam. Once the woman had managed to pull herself out from under the beam, she looked over at the new arrival as she pulled the boy with light green eyes and the black-eyed girl into a hug. Izuku stood off to the side a little awkwardly as he felt that him speaking would cause their moment to be interrupted. "Don't worry, children. Carla, I will save the day." A man with blonde hair and a slight stubble called out as he started to run towards the monster. As Izuku watched the man, he shook his head as he looked at the woman who was now looking at him. "Who are you, little guy? Can you tell me your name?" The woman, who he believes is named Carla, asked. "I'm Midoriya Izuku," the boy said, as the other two children looked at him confused as to why he answered with his last name first. "Hey, are you from outside the walls?" Carla asked, incredulously as Izuku tried to think about it. For some reason though, he couldn't remember where he came from, except for his name as well as his age. For some reason that was all he could remember from his memories, but he shook his head at the woman as she smiled sadly at him. "I wish I could come with you all in order to escape, but my legs are broken. I can't walk right," Carla said, as Izuku tried to lift the woman on his back. The other children tried to help him out but were met with conflicting results. The boy on his right couldn't lift the woman since he didn't have enough muscle on his body, whilst the girl could as Izuku lightly tapped the boy's arm causing him to look at him confusedly. "PP, please let me and your sister lift her," Izuku said, as the girl recognized his language. Carla seemingly noticed the language as the woman understood what he stated as she allowed Izuku to lift the woman with some slight issues as he carried her on his back. He was at least half her size in terms of height as he was only around 4 feet 11 inches in terms of height. As the small group started to escape from the smiling monster, the man returned this time as he carried Carla on his shoulders as he had the children follow after him. It wasn't until a few minutes later that they lost the giant beast as the man started to take notice of Izuku's presence with the group. "Well, I'll be you found another child, Carla. What happened to this one?" The man asked, as Carla gained a confused expression. He is speaking in a language that sounds familiar. Izuku, could you speak to Hannes to see if he knows it? Carla asked, as Izuku thought about it. Hajimashite, orwa watashi wa emitaria I Izuku disu. Izuku said, as the man looked at him as he tried to acknowledge the language. I've never heard of that language before, but when we get out of here, we should inform him about our country's language of Eldian. I hope that he can learn it quickly so that he won't have any issues with speaking to Eren, Mikasa and Armin. Hannes said, as Izuku listened in on their conversation. He didn't know what they were saying, but he guesses that the names that the man dropped were the girl in front of him as well as the boy in front of him. So he will have to see if he can get their names right later on. Hopefully he can and will manage to get his job done right. Within the next hour or two, the group of 5 managed to get into Wall Maria as they move towards the evacuation boats, as Hannes manages to get Carla, Mikasa, Eren and Izuku onto the boat as they get on board as fast as possible. As the group were talking, Carla had taken it upon herself to start teaching Izuku some Eldian in order to get him a jump start on learning the language of their country. Whilst that is happening, loud cracks are heard in the air as smoke comes over the walls in the Shiganshina district, if what Hannes told him was correct. On the other side of the wall, a group of garrison soldiers were shooting cannons at the Titans that were advancing on their current position. They were killing some of them, but many were getting past and brushing off their cannonball that were smashing them to hell. But as they were shooting and reloading their cannons, they heard loud stomps coming from down the road, and that was when they found a very large Titan of about 15 meters in height, as it was covered to the brim in armor. The group of garrison regiment soldiers were so confused that it took them a second to notice that the new Titan was getting into a sprinting stance. Once they were fully reloaded, they started to shoot at the approaching Titan as it ran towards the wall. A few shells came by the Titan as they hit another 13-meter-tall Titan in the chest, causing it to fly back, but one of the stray shots landed on the armor plating of the 15-meter-tall armored Titan as it moved faster. It was only a few minutes earlier that the gate was starting to close, and it was nearly closed entirely when the garrison soldiers had started to retreat through the wall, as the armored Titan had broken through Wall Maria as well. Once it broke through the gate, he placed his foot down on the ground as he slid across the ground before stopping entirely. Looking around the area, it found that there was some garrison regiment soldiers staring at it with slight fear as well as trepidation as it turned around and disappeared back into the other side of the walls in a mass of steam. Only to be replaced with dozens of Titans making their way through the new breach of the wall, and Hannes could be seen standing against a clock tower as he stared on in horror. I sure hope that I get that raise soon, because this is some serious bullshit. Hannes said, as he started to flee the area. It wasn't until the next day that Izuku woke up lying on his back as he thought about everything that happened in the last month since the destruction of Wall Maria, as Carla called it. The people of Shiganshina district were hiding within the district of Trost as they waited for their new homes to be made within the district. Izuku's speech of Eldian since the previous month he started had gotten better, as he was now able to hold a conversation in Eldian for a small while before he would get self-conscious about it. Eren, Armin and Mikasa were walking with Armin's grandfather as they waited for their food rations in order to bring back to Carla. Once they all returned, albeit with Eren talking SHT about some military police men who were being complete PP to the refugees of Shiganshina, they managed to get the food for their small group. Carla had recovered enough to which she could use her legs much better than 1 month prior, as her legs were simply sprained from the wood being on her. Had it been a bit higher, she would be bedridden as well as in a wheelchair for the rest of her life. So as the small group ate their dinner, Carla started to get Izuku to do his homework of Eldian language arts as the boy listened to her with complete trust. It was surprising for Carla to have a child other than Mikasa who was completely listening to her words as well as believing her completely. Izuku, what are you wishing to become in this country? Do you wish to become an artist? I have seen some of your art of superheroes that you've done. Carla asked with a slight teasing tone at the end. If it isn't bad, could I join the scouts? I know that it's dangerous, but if humanity loses hope, how will we survive? Izuku asked, as Carla listened to Izuku. Well, if Eren had put his words like that I would have been more compelled to allow him to go, but all he stated was, "I want to kill all the Titans and be free." Carla said, mimicking Aaron's childlike voice for a bit, causing the boy to get a blush on his face. It was nice and calm for the end of their year, and Izuku was glad to be in a family again, especially one that was seemingly just like him aside from his black and green highlighted hair. "How did your hair become green, Izuku?" Aaron asked, as Izuku shrugged. "I think I had this hair color ever since I was conceived," Izuku said, as he thought about how he said the last word. Wow, Izuku's using big words now. He's going to become a massive strategist in the future, I can just tell. Armin called out, as Izuku slightly blushed before taking out a notebook that he began to draw in. The sad part about his drawings was that the lead and ink that he used would usually be smeared into his ending art, but it was still appealing. Especially since he always drew heroes who were in costumes that depicted them in a stronger light. He didn't know why he was able to draw them this good, but he kept doing it as it helped make some money for the small group to live in Trost for a while. But like all good things, they must come to an end, since the government had stated that all able-bodied adults were to go outside the walls in order to reclaim Shiganshina as well as Wall Maria from the Titans. Carla was one of the many people who were taken away on the trip, and with that trip, none of the scouts as well as the 250,000 refugees who were a part of Shiganshina returned. All that remained was a smaller group of scouts from their regiment who managed to survive the ride back to Trost. It was here that Eren and Mikasa, along with Armin and Izuku, made their decision to join the military as well, for Izuku to do some artistry on the side to make sure that they could stay afloat. Looking off into the distance 3 years later, we find an Izuku who stands at a measly 5 feet 5 inches as he stares in front of himself as he heard the commander of the 104th Cadet Corps as he introduced himself. "Alright, cadets. My name is Keith Shotties, and you will not remember that name because by the end of this training that lasts 3 goddamn years, you will all be wishing that you were killed by the Titans. Now who the F are you, Private?" Keith Shotties called out a random cadet as the man continued down the lines to speak to random cadets. He even called out Armin as well as a smaller boy who was just slightly shorter than Izuku as they gave their reasons for being in the 104th Cadet Corps. Eventually the man reached Izuku as he saw the look in the boy's eyes. It was filled with both pain as well as complete determination as he stood in front of Izuku. "Cadet, what is your name and where do you hail from?" Keith Shotties called out to Izuku. Placing his right hand over his chest and his left behind his back, Izuku had gulped a little before speaking to the man. "Izuku Midoriya, sir. I hail from Shiganshina, sir." Izuku called out, as Keith looked actually a little shocked. "Why are you here, Private?" the man yelled in Izuku's face. "I want to be able to help humanity bring its first win in 3 to 5 years, sir," Izuku said, as Keith smiled at Izuku. "Congratulations, brat, you will be the broccoli for their meal." "Sixth row about face," Keith said, as Izuku felt his mind stop abruptly. "Broccoli. Why did he call me that?" Izuku thought to himself as he turned himself around. The name calling as well as calling out cadets ended about an hour later as Keith told them that they should get their sleep soon since training will be much harsher than their lives before this place. So as the man left, everyone barring one Sasha Browse, had left for the canteen in order to get some dinner before heading off to bed. Izuku though had stayed in the canteen as he drew some heroes that he briefly remembered from flashes of memories over the previous 3 years since the fall of Maria. Smiling to himself, he looks over at Eren, Mikasa and Armin as they smile at him as a singular thought comes to him. "I hope to become a scout soon enough. I can't wait to become strong enough to handle life outside the walls." Izuku thought to himself as he ate his food. 3 years of training built up to this. After the meeting with Keith Shotties, the entire entourage of cadets went to the canteen as they prepared for their dinner of the day. The next morning was going to be filled with training from morning until night, so Izuku had plans of making sure that he would keep himself physically ready. As he left the canteen early that evening after having his own dinner early, he returned back to his cabin with some of the boys present inside as he went to a small table. He pulled out a small piece of paper as he drew some more heroic people that his mind supplied, He never knew who those people were, but he for some reason held them in high regards. The one he was currently drawing at the moment was a very tall man who had the body structure of an orca. His features were similar to that of an orca but more akin to a human since he was standing tall and intimidating. As Izuku continued to draw the man as intimidating as possible, he never heard the sounds of Eren and Armin coming inside the room behind him quietly. They both had noticed Izuku's love of drawing out superheroes, as the boy was very lifelike even with only ink. They wished at this moment that the boy had some colors in order to color the images in, since they were so lifelike to them. They found him drawing a new hero, but they were confused as to why he was more animal-like than the other ones. "So any reason why you are making a whale, a hero?" Armin asked, as Izuku shook his head. "Because of the fact that some heroes can take different forms. I'm not sure how I know this, but this is my imagination, but there might be heroes out there who can look similar to aquatic life as well as mammal life on the earth," Izuku said, as he finished the picture. "I see. Well, we should all get some sleep should we want to have Commander Shadi's wrath," Eren said, as the group had decided to go to bed for the night. Unaware of the fact that the man was looking through the window from an unknown angle as he watched the boy draw his picture. Boy could have become an artist in the capital and gained enough money to live on his own there, but chooses to be a soldier. That is some serious thinking there. I will make sure that coming here is the best thing for him," Shadi said, as he walked away just quiet enough that nobody would hear him. The next morning the cadets were running around the campsite as a warm-up for what they would be doing later on in that afternoon. Izuku was in the middle of the group as he had been more antsy about their training for the day and had been mentally preparing for it. By the time their warm-up run was over, the cadets moved over to a field which had Shadi standing in the middle of it. "Alright cadets, you will all be learning how to wield a blade against an opponent. And your partner's mission is to fully get the weapon out of your hands and into their own hands. Disarm your opponent and SWCH who has to attack with the bladed weapon, rinse and repeat until it is muscle memory. You never know when you will need training like this," Shadi said, as he walked around the place watching over the students. Once the students got into teams of 2, Shadi's kept his eye on Izuku as well as the partner he was given as the boy was staring at his own opponent of Jean. The boy ran towards Izuku as he half-assedly attacked the boy, and Izuku immediately placed the boy on the ground and ripped the weapon out of his hand. Jean was then placed on the defensive as Izuku attacked Jean as if it was a real thing that the young man had to learn how to defend against. Of course, Jean knew that this was training and that Izuku wouldn't hurt him too bad, but he would prefer that if Izuku didn't go at it as if he was literally trying to kill him. But even though Izuku was telegraphing his attack patterns, it was just too agile for Jean to get a hand on the boy's knife. As the two went back and forth, Shadi's decided to give Jean the opponent of Marco, and moved Izuku over to Mikasa as the girl stared at Izuku. Giving the boy the blunted weapon that Mikasa had held, he then told the two to go at it, and the change was instant as both Izuku and Mikasa clashed in the middle as one tried to stab, and the other countered. Mikasa was physically stronger than Izuku, but the boy had the smaller frame which made countering him slightly difficult, but not enough. Izuku was still flipped onto the ground behind Mikasa as the girl shrugged her shoulders and helped Izuku get up from the ground. But now that Mikasa was the one with the blade, she held it in a reverse grip as Izuku stared at her movement, and as soon as she sprinted at him Izuku kept an eye on her body language. Shadi's was watching from afar as he kept a close eye on Mikasa's body movements as well, and as soon as Mikasa made it into Izuku's close range, both Shadi's and Mikasa were shocked as Izuku got into an unknown stance. Placing his arms out on both sides of himself as if opening himself up for an attack, he then moved his left palm into Mikasa's solar plexus, causing her to unwillingly let out a pain-filled gasp as Izuku then grabbed her right wrist and twisted hard and caused her to let go of her weapon as he then grabbed it and placed it against her neck in a movement that seemed so fast that both Shadi's and Mikasa were completely taken aback. Once Izuku moved back, he apologized for his actions against her and wished to continue, and once that happened, both were going at it like they were actual fighting champions. The interaction between the two got everyone's attention and got them to try that much harder if the two were going non-stop at full power. It wasn't until lunch was called that everyone watched as Izuku collapsed to the ground in seemingly pain, but in actuality was just pure exhaustion. The boy had worn himself out fighting Mikasa, but he had earned something that would be crucial later on in his life that he would be sure to use against her if they fought again. He learned how she fought and would use that to his advantage whenever they would be pinned against one another for fights. But this would be a lesson for Mikasa at a later date in order to change her fighting style around Izuku, since the little rat is an analytical mastermind. By the time lunch was over, the group had deduced that they were going to do some martial arts training as they had moved back to their area without the blunted weapons. Shotties had then confirmed that they would be learning martial arts to take on their Titan enemies should they be without their ODM gear, but was ill-advised since it would mean their own demise. But it would be still useful since they would run into horrible humans in the future who would want nothing but their demise at their own hands. Once all the cadets were seen training with one another, Shotties watched from afar as they all physically trained against one another in the martial arts they were shown by instructors. As this was happening, Izuku was seen sparring against himself since he was trying to improve his own fighting style to the point there was no flaws. There was a slight sweat forming on his forehead as the young man was punching and kicking the air as fast as possible as well as hard. It wasn't much longer before someone came along to see how they would fare against him, and it was much easier for some of them since he hadn't used his attack style on some of them. Some were capable of fighting against him, but most were defeated unless they were Mikasa, Reiner, Bertolt and Annie. The others were still having trouble fighting Izuku's completely different fighting style, and Shotties believed that it was completely different from the fighting forms all Eldians are taught. Keeping this information to himself, he kept an eye on the cadets in order to oversee their training from a distance. By the time it was near dusk, the training of the students was called off as they would have more time in order to get better over the course of 3 years. As Izuku sat in the canteen, he ate some food that was slightly stale, but he could care less as he overheard Eren and Jean getting into an argument over something. Sighing to himself, he moved over towards Armin as he just started to eat, quietly appreciating the quiet nature of the boy. By the time Shotties had arrived, both boys were stopped from their impromptu fight as they would be given only one chance before having a punishment. Izuku would fall asleep that night as he thought about the future and what it would hold against the Titans in 3 years. 2 years later, Izuku is in the middle of training with his ODM gear as he tried to increase its effectiveness in battle when he was approached. "Hey Marco, what do you need?" the young man asked, as Marco smiled. "Hey, just came over here to see what you've been doing to your assigned ODM gear," Marco said, as Izuku smiled. "It's nothing, just upgrading it with some small materials that were given to me. Other than drawing in lifelike images, I like to build things, and I was just trying to make my ODM gear that much more effective should I go face to face with a Titan," Izuku said, as Marco nodded. The two would converse about how they would take down a Titan should the two be placed in the same battlefield together. As it would turn out, Izuku wasn't really good with the ODM gear since he was more imbalanced than most people would believe. The young man was a total klutz as he would fall over the literal air itself sometimes and somehow get hurt. It was how he met a girl named Sarah Elisa in the nurse's cabin, as the young man had somehow tripped over a small root hanging out from a tree and broke his arm. The girl had the dream of becoming a doctor similar akin to Grisha Jagar, as the man was a literal legend when it came to modern medicine. The girl seemingly had a thing for Izuku, but from what Izuku had shown he wasn't in love with the girl, and the girl seemingly knew this but became friends with him. Izuku had the strangest relationship with her though. Sometimes he would blush when looking at her, and other times he would protect her from unwanted people like an overprotective big brother, even though Sarah was literally 3 years older than Izuku himself. Once the final day of training was there, the students were taken out into Titan country so that they could have their first encounter with a Titan to see how they would react. And the effect was immediate, as Izuku and most other capable fighters were actually able to go towards the Titans and kill some of them, as some others were fearful at first before entering the fray, not wanting to be left behind. And there was a small amount who were not wanting to fight Titans as they stayed near the commandant. Once that part of their training was over, Shotties had brought the group back to camp so that they could spend their last day training a bit with their ODM gear as well as physical fighting before their graduation. Izuku at this point was 14 years of age as he made it near 15, and he was so happy that his birthday was in the middle of July. Especially since graduation day for the 104th Cadet Corps was on his birthday specifically, as he was happy to be 15 now. For all those within the 104th Cadet Corps, you will hear your name and step up, as you will be the top 10 best cadets from this year's cadets. Shadi said, as he prepared to use his voice to the maximum. Number 10, Krista Lenz. Stand forward. Shadi said, as the girl stood forwards. Number 9, Sasha Browse. Stand forward. Shadi said once more as Sasha did what Krista did. Number 8, Connie Springer. Stand forward. Number 7, Marco Bot. Stand forward. Number 6, Jean Kirstein. Stand forward. Number 5, Aaron Jagar. Stand forward. Number 4, Annie Leonhardt. Stand forward. Number 3, Berthold Hoover. Stand forward. Number 2, Rainer Braun. Stand forward. Number 1 and the most proficient of all the 104th Cadet Corps. Mikasa Ackerman. Stand forward. Keith Shadis called out, as Izuku stood next to Armin as he nodded at the placements of the top 10. I knew that I wouldn't make it, but I know that I am proficient in other areas that the top 10 aren't. Izuku muttered quietly to himself as Keith spoke up. These are the top 10 of this year's Cadet Corps. These are the people you strive to become similar to in skill as well as experience as you learn how to become better soldiers. As of now, the 104th Cadet Corps is now disbanded. Be prepared for your next life as soldiers for humanity. Keith said, as everyone saluted to the man as they all walked towards the canteen to celebrate. Izuku was celebrating on his own as he walked around the canteen in the dark and cool night. He was looking at the stars as he thought about his life up until this point in his life. He smiled as he watched some meteors blast past the moon as he looked further out into the sky as if he was searching for the meaning of life. He was completely unaware of who was coming up behind himself as he thought to himself, appreciating the silent night. Well, what do we have here? What are you doing out here, Izuku-kun? A feminine voice asked, as Izuku turned around to find Sasha Browse standing behind himself. Hey Sasha, how are you doing? Izuku asked, as the girl smiled at him. I wanted to come see where you were. Everyone was celebrating, meanwhile you are out here and not enjoying the free food. The girl said, as Izuku chuckled at her antics. You remember how we all started our training 3 years ago, especially with our introductions? Izuku questioned as the girl thought about it. Can't say I do. What do you remember? Sasha asked, as she sat down on the step next to Izuku. I remember how you were eating a potato during roll call, and Shadi's Dancho walked over to you and asked you for an introduction. Izuku said, chuckling slightly. Wah. I thought everyone forgot about that. Sasha called out, as tears comically came flowing out of her eyes. Don't worry, I think that certain people remember that day, but I will keep it a secret from others. Izuku said, as the girl sighed in relief. I thought you were a monster when you brought that up, Izuku-kun. Sasha said, as she let out a huff of air. I remember my first time trying to use the ODM gear for the first time. I guess you can laugh at me for that. Especially since my first time I was able to balance perfectly on it, but then moments later when we were training with it in the trees surrounding the camp, I nearly hit a tree. Izuku said, as Sasha laughed out loud at that. They sat there in the cool night air as they star-gazed with one another as Izuku looked at Sasha and blushed slightly when he saw that she was only wearing the undershirt of her uniform. What happened to your uniform jacket? Izuku asked, stuttering a little as the girl looked at him. It got too hot inside the canteen, and I decided to take off my jacket and come out here to find you. You have this calming aura about you. I can definitely see animals coming over to you, especially a bird to turn that bush of a head you got that you call hair into a nest. Sasha said, as she looked at him with a smirk. Well, at least what you said actually had happened to me. Izuku said, as Sasha looked at him in awe. Wait, a bird already tried to make a nest out of that bush you call hair? She asked, as Izuku delved onto that story to her for a few minutes. Wow, I never knew that a small bird tried to do that to your hair. Did it ever leave? Sasha asked, as Izuku shook his head showing the small nest with eggs. Wow, she laid her eggs in your hair? Sasha asked, as Izuku nodded. I have to put them in a high spot where I usually sleep so that she doesn't get lost trying to find me. Izuku said, pulling the nest out and replacing it with a cut portion of his hair before leaving to the cabins. Sasha had followed Izuku as he placed it where he usually slept in the boys' cabin as they watched the bird come back as she looked at the makeshift hair pile that provided warmth to her eggs. She chirped as she laid on her eggs once more as Izuku scratched her neck softly as the bird softly chirped from the attention he gave. Wow, with how calm you are towards animals, I'd think you were some kinds of animal guru. Sasha said, chuckling as Izuku nodded. Leaving the bird in the little nest by the window, Izuku and Sasha left the mother bird to tend to her unborn children as they walked around the camp. We have to prepare for tomorrow. We have to see what the garrison regiment will be placing us so we can see what it's like to work under their forces. At least until we choose our very own regiment to join. Speaking of which regiment are you choosing? Izuku asked, as Sasha thought about it. Eren's speech about the scouts really made it a no-brainer. I am going to join the scouts in order to reclaim our lost land so I can have all the food I can eat. Sasha said, as Izuku chuckled before looking at how she was still taller than he was. 3 years and I still am not as tall as you. Izuku grumbled as the girl laughed. Yeah, how tall were you when we first were introduced to one another? Sasha asked, as Izuku mentioned his pitiful 5-foot height at the time. Well, at least you look adorable right now, seeing you complain about your height makes it funnier. Sasha said, as Izuku lightly smacks her arm with a pout. Well, I'm going to head to bed, I want to get some sleep before we will be worked to the bone tomorrow. Izuku said, as he walked over to the new cabins for the graduates. It was the next morning as the cadets were introduced to high-ranking members of the garrison regiment as they taught all the cadets how to clean the cannons on top of the walls. They also informed them how to keep an eye on the horizon for any new titans that might arrive since they needed to be prepared for the return of the colossal titan and armored titans if they show up again. Izuku was on the wall as he was clearing up the insides of the cannons so that they could be used against the titans and not be jamming up. He was in the middle of cleaning another cannon when he was approached by Eren and the others, plus Sasha looking like she stole something from the garrison regiment already. What is going on? Izuku asked, as the group talked about their dreams as well as the regiment they wished to go to. Izuku smiled as Mina, Thomas, Connie, and Eren stated where they wanted to go, and it even got a little emotional as Mina and Thomas both stated that they wanted to go to the scouts with Eren. That was the time that Sasha pulled out some meat from inside her jacket as she started to drool. Hey guys, look what I found in the meat locker of the garrison regiment. Sasha asked, as she pulled it out. Shaking his head, Izuku told them off as Connie spoke up about what the girls said, being stupid before asking to have a slice of it. Leave it up to the 2 dumbest cadets of our year to battle it out for number 1 dumbest cadet. Izuku said, as Connie actually spoke up. Yeah, I really hate when the dumb people are acting all smart and everything. The boy said, as Izuku looked at him pointedly. What? So you want to talk SHT about yourself? Eren teased as Connie screamed at him. It was a really fun time for them all as Izuku got back to cleaning the cannons again just to be sure that they were ready for use. Hey guys, we should probably get to work, don't want the garrison to be on our butts. Thomas said, as the group got back to work. While that was happening, Eren was about to jinx them all with what he was thinking in his mind. So as Izuku was clearing out the cannon of debris as well as gunpowder that was a beach to clean out, he heard a familiar lightning strike come from behind himself. Turning around, he saw that the colossal titan had appeared in front of them as he looked incredibly intimidating now that he was so close. But because of the intimidation display he caused steam to blast everyone off the top of the wall as he kicked a hole into the wall at the gate. As Izuku fell towards the ground, he launched his ODM gear's anchor into the wall as he skidded to a stop a few meters above the hole. What in the hell? Izuku asked, as the boy looked back up at the wall as he saw Eren flying towards the colossal titan in fury. Don't just stand there. We need to take him down. He's the only one who can take down the walls, get him before he can escape. Eren called out, as Izuku noticed some titans getting in through the hole in the wall. Jumping from the safety of the height he was standing on the wall, he moved towards one of the buildings near the hole that wasn't destroyed in the chaos of the colossal titan's attack. Izuku watched as two titans of at least 10 meters up to 15 meters moved towards his location with their scary smiles on their faces. Preparing himself for a fight against the titans coming in, he was backed up by Connie and Sasha as they landed next to him. Pulling out his blades, he watched as Sasha and Connie did the same as they ran towards the titans with him as he jumped in the air. Using the ODM gear to fly around a moving target, Izuku was much more concerned about his own safety as the titan he was targeting the nape of would constantly turn its eyes as well as body to look at him. He flew around as he distracted it from Connie and Sasha as they moved behind it each time Izuku moved to grab its nape, and as soon as the titan flew towards him with a massive jump, the young man had used some gas in order to dodge the strike as he called out to Sasha and Connie as he focused on the next one moving towards the city. Moving as fast as possible, he managed to catch up with the titan as he attached his anchor onto its nape before accelerating himself to it and slicing it apart. As soon as that was completed, Izuku turned around to see what became of Sasha and Connie and found them flying over to him with Eren not far behind. "Are you alright, Izuku?" Eren called out, as he landed near Izuku. The boy jumped off the back of the disintegrating titan as he moved closer to Eren as he made a comment. 3 years of training built up to this. I call bullshit. Izuku said, as he groaned into Eren's shoulder. As the cadets of the 104th had arrived at the main base of operations within Trost, they found Captain Kitz Warman, who was telling them what their mission was. "Alright cadets, your mission is to buy time for all the civilians to escape into Wall Rose. You are to lay down your lives in order to protect them. As of right now, their lives are worth more than your own. Make sure that you listen to your squad leaders and follow directions because it might be a life-or-death decision that you make," Kit said, as he left the group to get their refills on their gear. Izuku was moving through the squads that gathered together as he collected his gear and refilled on his gas and blades. He was listening to all the silence within the base, with the chaos outside of the base from all the titans battling it out with the colossal titan squad who were holding them back. He was approached by someone from his left as he saw that it was Sasha once again as the girl looked at him with a fearful gaze. Are we all really going to lay our lives down for the civilians like this? I really don't want to die," Sasha said, for once not looking carefree. Izuku stood up as he fixed his gear and moved over to her and pulling her into a hug as he allowed her to cry in his chest. He knew that there was nothing to say, he just held her in his arms and rubbed her back as he whispered sweet nothings into her ear to calm her down. This continued for a few minutes until Izuku heard his name being assigned as the squad leader of himself, Connie Springer, Emer and Crystallenz. "I got to go, Sasha, but how about when we reclaim Trost back from the Titans, because I know we can, we just hang out and stargaze for a while?" Izuku asked, as Sasha thought about it. "Sure thing, Izuku, can I stay like this for a little bit longer?" she asked, as Izuku chuckled before patting her head. "Don't worry, I won't die, we can do this again after our mission is complete," Izuku said, as he smiled at her as she looked up to him. Meeting his gaze, she couldn't help but smile as well as she hugged him once more, causing him to blush slightly as he felt her squeeze herself a little more this time. "Stay safe, I will too," Sasha said, before leaving to her own squad. Shaking his head, he turned around to see a smirking Connie, a smiling Emer, and a devilishly appealing girl shaking her head at him. "What?" Izuku asked, as they started to leave. "What? What did I do?" Izuku called out, running after them. As Izuku stood on one of the buildings near the rearguard positions, he looked over his gear as he overheard Emer and Connie arguing with one another. "I swear you just don't know when to stop talking SHT about us," Connie growled out, as Emer smirked at him. "I know that you are short for a reason, but didn't think it was to show how small your brain was." The girl said, as Izuku shook his head. Please stop fighting. If you don't stop, I will have to leave you, Emer. Krista said, as Emer immediately reined herself in. Izuku chuckled at their conversation as he and Connie just ran out in order to take the fight to the Titans after hearing the high-ranking garrison soldier inform them to get the Titans that are getting too close to the rear of Trost. As the group had moved throughout the entire small area of Trost, they had taken down a collective amount of 6 Titans. Some were taken out by Izuku, who had cut through them all, and some were killed by Connie or Emer. Making their way to where the vanguard was located, they increased their pace as they ran into Squad Jaeger as they were having some slight trouble with a particular 2 Titans. Izuku sent Connie over to the other side of the Titan as he attached his anchors to the shoulder blade of the Titan before having Connie do the same, and as soon as they reached the same elevation, they pulled themselves down to slice 2 opposing parts of the arm muscles. As soon as the arms had fallen down from where they were reaching out from both cadets, Thomas had flown in and managed to slice through the nape of the Titan's neck before they all moved on to the smaller one and killed it easily. Thanks for the help, Midoriya, we can take care of ourselves now. Eren said, before leading his group away. Moving through the district, Izuku and company had run into their own sets of Titans as they kept growing in numbers over the day, and they soon came across an abnormal Titan who moved not like normal Titans. It was attracted to the humans that were gathered in the back of the district but was caught in the middle of the district near the giant boulder. Izuku used his gas enough to increase his speed in order to catch up to the Titan, and as this was happening, Emer had pulled up a stun gun in order to blind the Titan for him to attack it. Flying behind the Titan, he started to ascend to the sky in order to gain momentum in order to kill it, and that was when Emer blinded the Titan, allowing him time in order to fall down and slice its nape. Once that was completed, Izuku had made sure to move back to the others, as they watched the main base of operations get taken down in one fell swoop. Breathing heavily, they all landed on one of the buildings to check their supplies. At the moment, Izuku was still good with 2 more gas canisters on his back whilst everyone else were running dry. Go see how the evacuation is going. We will keep an eye on things here. Emer said, as Izuku prepared to leave before they heard a voice nearby. Ayayawayawa. Wait, who was that? Emer called out, as Izuku immediately recognized the voice. That's Armin. Let's go see what happened. Izuku called out, leading the group to where he heard the voice come from. It wasn't much longer before the squad had arrived to where Armin was, as he was looking completely broken and wasn't paying anyone any attention. Armin, are you alright? Connie asked, as the boy just remained silent. Where's Eren and the others? Krista asked, as the boy violently flinched. Izuku understood what that meant immediately as he placed a hand on the girl's shoulder as she looked at him. Shaking his head, the girl realized what had happened and placed a hand over her mouth as she thought about all the deaths that happened. Hey, what are you all doing down there? You will get the Titans to come over to you all. A familiar voice called out, landing next to Izuku. Looking to his right, he found Reiner as the young man was looking at everyone with concern as well as worry. Armin is the only one left from Squad Jaeger. I believe everyone in his squad was wiped out. Izuku said, as everyone gained a sad expression on their faces. As they all let out a small huff of air, they shook their heads as Izuku stood back up before checking his gear once more as he walked over to the edge of the building. Where are you going? Bertolt asked, as Izuku looked back at him. Going to check on the evacuation. They should have already evacuated everyone by now. You're welcome to join me on the way there to see what happened. Izuku said, taking off into the distance. He was soon followed by Annie and Bertolt as Reiner had opted to stay near everyone else on the rooftop as Izuku looks out to the groups that are shooting green flares in need of assistance. Arriving at the first green signal flare, Izuku found some garrison regiment soldiers attempting to make a small base in order to resupply those who are still fighting. Helping the garrison regiment soldier, they thanked him for his help as he moved on to the next one. He was beginning to run low on gas and blades when he found himself saving Marco Bot from being Titan food. Jumping in the way of a Titan's attack, Izuku slammed his foot into the eye of the Titan, causing it to flinch slightly away from the young man, changing his blades and gas. But that was all the time needed for it to grab Izuku immediately as he ran out of gas not that high above it. Marco called out his name as Izuku looked at the jaws of death that came for him, but just in the nick of time, Annie had come in and killed the Titan, causing it to drop him from its grasp. Flying around the Titan's falling body and grabbing the short boy, she pulled him close before tossing him onto the rooftop. "Keep an eye out on your SHT. We don't need you to run out right now," Annie said, as Izuku nodded before standing back up on the roof. "If it's any use to you, take some of the gas that I have. It won't be much, but I need to make sure that the garrison aren't wiped out from here. Could you two help me?" Marco asked, looking to Izuku, Annie and Bertolt. "I am on my way to getting to the rear guard in order to see what happened. Annie and Bertolt will come with you though," Izuku said, as both nodded. As soon as both squads had left, Izuku looked at how many blades he had left. "Only one set of blades left, need to make them count and find Mikasa and the others," Izuku said, before taking off towards the rearguard positions. He would make it about 15 meters away from the rearguard position when he was ambushed by two Titans as he flew around them both in order to try and kill them both. But just as he was flying around, a third Titan had jumped from the air and grabbed at him from the air. As he was in an aerial spin trying to get away from the two behind him, he had completely missed the one grabbing at him. So by the time he had been grabbed once again, he felt something snap inside his left arm before he was lifted by said arm to the Titan's face. Looking at it with a fierce expression on his face, he pointed his left blade at it before throwing his blade at its face, slicing through one of its eyes. Once the blade caused it to let go of the young man, Izuku used his one good arm to switch blades to his right hand as he flew towards it in order to try and slice the nape with the blade itself. But just as fast as he tried to get behind it, the very same Titan had turned its head to look at him in the face before opening its mouth and slamming them shut, accidentally slicing through his left arm at the elbow. "Jaiya-ha!" Izuku screamed as the Titan started to swallow him into itself. As he fell into the stomach of the Titan, he felt himself slowly from the feet start to be covered in a weird mucus. But as he struggled to move about the watery gravesite for himself, he growled out his anger towards this situation. "DDMN it, I need to get to those at the rear guard. I won't let this be the end." Izuku growled out before passing out due to the excessive heat inside the beast's stomach. Unknown to him, his body was about to go a metamorphosis in order to save the day from any and all harm for the rest of the day. As he was slowly seeping into the fluid so that it could completely envelope him, his body started to spark with a yellowish gold color before everything went black for him. The last thing he could feel from himself was the simple fact that he felt much taller than he used to be. Izuku felt nothing but just nothing and a massive heat surrounding his body. He couldn't wake up from this dream he was having. He was walking around Trost as if in search of something to prevent the Titans from even entering the city anymore. And as soon as he reached a portion of the city where a large boulder was sitting without even being able to be moved by the humans below, he found some humans looking at him in both fear and slight awe. He saw a specific human looking at him with clear confusion as well as slight fear as Izuku looked towards them as he walked over to inspect them. Once he was close enough to inspect them all, he watched as some of them were preparing to fight him if anything got too dangerous. Stopping short of them all, Izuku used his new giant form's arm and lifted it to point at the brown-haired girl who was gawking at him right next to a small bald young man. The girl pointed to herself as she used her ODM gear to get to the giant in front of them as soon as the Titan had nodded at the girl pointing at herself. Once the girl was in front of his face, Izuku took in her features, and he saw that the girl was Sasha from the memories he saw when he was resting inside the nape of this creature's neck. Pointing at the nape of his neck, he tried to pull something away from the nape so that the girl could pull him out. It was too hot for him to handle being in there. Sasha, noticing what he was mentioning, moved over to right behind his nape as she watched as the Titan was clearly trying to pull the armor from around the nape with some struggles. Using her blades to slice into the clear flesh between the armor, it allowed Izuku to pull apart the nape, allowing him to breathe some nice fresh air as he heard Sasha speaking to him. "Izuku, what in the hell is this? Why didn't you tell anyone that you were the armored Titan?" Sasha scolded as Izuku managed to pull his face from the muscle fibers holding him to the spinal bones of the Titan. I didn't know this would happen. I'm supposed to be dead. Izuku said, as the girl stared at him. How would you be dead? Sasha yelled at him as she pulled him out of the muscle fibers. As soon as he was disconnected from the fibers, they watched as the Titan form had slowly fallen to the ground as it was disintegrating from existence. At a safe location from the Titan's hands, Izuku and Sasha looked at one another as they looked for those who were nearby to see Izuku's Titan form. As soon as it was shown that Izuku was more docile than the original armored Titan was, Sasha immediately realized that he wasn't the armored Titan that wanted the destruction of humanity. How are you going to tell the MP's scouts, as well as the garrison, that you are here to help? You are basically a wanted criminal. Sasha questioned as Izuku sat there gathering his air. I don't know, but we need to find Armin and the others. They will know what to do, and I need to gather some strength. I have a plan to stop the T-Titans from entering the city again. Izuku said, as Sasha nodded her head, picking up the boy and placing him on her back. Just hang on tight, I will get you to some of the others who can do some first aid on you. Sasha said, as Izuku passed out again on her back. Once the girl arrived at some of the people who saw the armored Titan and watched it kill some Titans who were nearby, they saw Sasha return to them after the armored Titan had essentially allowed Sasha to kill it. Sasha, get away from him. Where did Izuku come from anyway? Connie screamed at her as the girl placed Izuku on the rooftop. I don't have time for this, Connie, we need to get his temperature back down to normal heights. He's too hot. Sasha said, as she pulled out some cold wet rags. She got on the way to the building from the small watering hole nearby. As she started to cool Izuku's forehead, Bertolt had walked over as he stared at Izuku with complete confusion as well as trepidation. If there was another armored Titan, would that mean that there could be another colossal Titan within the walls as well? Thinking about taking Izuku to the homeland where he and Reiner had come from earlier in their youth, he decided to keep Izuku safe. Well, we should probably get to the others soon, so one of you hold Izuku, we need to change locations. Bertolt said, as he ran off to find some other cadets. Once Bertolt had left, Connie watched as Izuku's eyes were opened up again as he looked around the area for the boulder that he needed to move to the hole in the wall. Hey, stay on the ground, Izuku. I don't know what in the hell happened to you to make you a Titan, but you need to inform us about what happened. Connie said, as Izuku struggled to get out of the boy's grip. I was on my way to see what the hold-up on the evacuation was. I was ambushed by Th3 Titans and had little to no gas left, and as I tried to take one of the Titans out, the T3rd arrived and ate me. Izuku said, as Sasha looked at Izuku to see if he was feeling something akin to disgust. What are you even trying to do? You just got out of that Titan skin as if it was a second body. Connie exclaimed as Izuku looked at his hand before looking at Sasha's blades. I need to plug up the wall. To stop the influx of T-Titans. Izuku said, as he stood up and grabbed Sasha's blade and sliced his hand, causing a massive spike in electricity to surround him. As he jumped from the rooftop, as both friends of Izuku had watched in awe as well as fear, they watched as his Titan had formed from the feet first as it grew in height up to what he would look like as a Titan. By the time they saw his nape forming around him, they saw that he was encasing himself in a weird kind of crystal to protect him from any and all harm. Once he landed on the ground, he forced himself to take control of the Titan with his mental actions so that the Titan would do as he asked. As his Titan form made its way over to the giant boulder, every single person who was killing Titans were alerted to his arrival, and once the garrison regiment members who were arriving on the scene, they found Izuku walking towards the giant boulder. What in the hell is that Titan doing? Why is it not destroying the wall? One of the garrison soldiers called out, confused. That armored Titan isn't the original. It's a variant of it, and it's thankfully on our side. Sasha and Connie called out as they land next to the garrison. Soldiers. What do you mean it's on our side? It's one of the monsters that destroyed Wall Maria. They called at the two cadets. Well, look at its hair. It's green, not yellowish tan. Connie said, remembering Eren stating that the armored titan's hair color was similar to Reiner's hair color. If what you two say is true, why is this only coming to light now? The Commer garrison soldier asked, as the two cadets looked at one another before speaking. We only heard about it from the source. He's our friend from the cadet corps. He had no clue about these powers he has. Just that he can use them. Besides, he is going to help us in reclaiming the district from the Titans. Just assist him in getting the boulder over to the hole in the wall. Connie called out, pulling his blades out and running towards the armored titan. As the garrison with the assistance of Connie and Sasha took down titans that got in Izuku's way down, they watched as his titan had managed to lift the boulder without much trouble as it began its way over to the hole in the massive wall. Unknown to them, on the other side of the district, another Rouge Titan was making waves against some of the more aggressive Titans over near the main base of Trost District. The small group consisting of 3 members of the garrison and 2 cadets of the 104th Cadet Corps, they had started to take down each and every Titan in the area to provide a way to get Izuku to the entrance without any Titans trying to disturb him from his mission. By the time he was right in front of the hole in the wall, they had garnered some attention from the still-living vanguard as they stared at the group in confusion. They watched as the Titan had crouched slightly in order to close the wall up, and as soon as it was in position it shifted slightly and slammed the boulder into the wall, sealing it up forever. With that hole done and over with, the garrison as well as the cadets in the area had looked worse for wear, but at the same time they were happy since this would mark the first win against the Titans since the last 100 years since they first appeared. As this happened, Izuku's Titan form had started to teeter off balance as it collapsed to the ground in exhaustion and started to slowly dissipate from existence, allowing the young man to escape from the crystal that held him inside safe and sound. Once free from the crystal, he had looked around to find some garrison members staring at him with slight fear as well as problematic expressions. Thinking quickly and as fast as he could, he stumbled off the Titan carcass as he fell onto the ground with Sasha running towards him. Cough. A little help here? Izuku asked, before he felt himself losing consciousness. As the garrison regiment members had stared at the scene before themselves, they looked at one another before walking over to the duo and kneeling towards Izuku and Sasha. Can you tell us that you are firmly on the side of humanity? The leading member asked, as Izuku regained consciousness for this moment in time to hear the question. I've always sided with life. I don't want humanity to die off yet. We haven't shown our true potential. Izuku mumbled before passing out completely, everything going black. As Izuku took in the words of both Commander Erwin and Captain Levi in front of himself, he had sat there in the holding cell looking morbidly confused. What are you talking about? Izuku asked, as both men looked to one another before nodding. Well, from what we had heard from certain sources, you have become an armored titan, although your form is far different from the armored titan that destroyed the wall around 5 years ago. We want to see the full extent of your powers as a titan shifter, and possibly regain the land that we had lost due to the titans. Erwin said, as Izuku nodded. That would be much more ideal. I would certainly hope that I can assist you all in this endeavor. Izuku said, as Captain Levi nodded along. You will be placed in my squad as well as your cadet in arms Eren Jaeger. You will be watched by my squad whilst Eren will be watched by my privately at all times. Should he become a titan and attack us, I would have full clearance to take you both out. Levi said, as Izuku nodded his head. That is if we are able to get you away from the prying hands of the military police and the garrison regiment. Erwin said, as Izuku looked confused at the man. What are you talking about? Izuku questioned as Erwin spoke up. The military police believe you to be a danger to us all because your form is similar to the armored titan from 5 years in the past. They still believe that you are an enemy of humanity and are just biding your time in order to break through the walls again. Erwin said, as Izuku slumped into his bed. I don't wish ill will upon humanity, all I want to do is help. I don't even know how I even manifested these powers. All I remember was being consumed by a titan before feeling electricity all around my body. Everything was black before I heard Sasha talking to me again. Izuku muttered to himself as both Erwin and Levi looked at one another. You're telling us that this Sasha had managed to bring you to the surface from your Titan form? Levi asked, as Izuku thought about his answer before nodding. Well, congratulations kid, you might just be able to be rescued from death. Erwin said, as Izuku gained a comical look on his face of pure shock. It was a few hours later that Izuku found himself being pushed through the halls by 2 military police regiment officers as they glared harshly at him. You should have died in the battle for Trost. You DMN traitor. The officers said, as Izuku huffed before they arrived in a courtroom. Being pushed inside, Izuku walked forwards without even trying to defend himself from them as he saw a large pole object in the middle of the room and immediately knelt next to it as the military police officers looked on in shock at how cooperative he was. Snapping out of it, they placed the metal bar through the cuff links as Izuku instinctively pulled on the chains a little, seeing that they were tight on him. Looking around, he found the whole room was filled with militaristic leaders of each regiment, but the one he was looking at the most was a man behind a podium holding a hammer in his left hand. Alright, let's get this over with, we have another Titan shifter in the other room awaiting trial. So this is the trial of Izuku Midoriya. All who are present, even the convict, please agree with what has been stated. The old man said, as everyone present gave hums of approval. Alright, so let's get this party started. My name is Darius Zackley, and I am the current judge for if whether or not Izuku Midoriya should be killed. Can we have our prosecutors give their reasons for wanting him either dead or alive? Zackley asked. Yes sir, my name is Nile, and it is within my reason that we are to conduct experiments on Izuku Midoriya, finding his true nature before disposing of him later on once we have all the answers we require from the young man. That is all. Nile said, as everyone erupted into talks. Alright, human experimentation before killing him off when you can't get anything else from him. What can the scouts do that will either provide life or death to our defendant? Zackley asked, as he looked at Erwin Smith. My name is Erwin Smith, of the Scout Regiment. And it is within my thoughts as well as goals that we use Izuku Midoriya's armored Titan powers to reclaim land that was previously lost to us by the power of Titans. We will enter the area within Wall Maria and clear out as many Titans that are there before arriving at Wall Maria, where we will use the other Titan shifter to plug up the walls. Once that is complete, we will explore outside of the walls later on and reclaim land that was previously lost to us. That is all, sirs. Erwin said, as Zackley nodded his head along. How does the Wall religion perceive this? The commander-in-chief of the whole regiment militia asked. As a follower of the Wall, it is seen as despicable that someone with the power of a Titan should be used to plug up the walls. They are seen as a complete mockery of the walls that protect us, and we see fit that this young man be put to death for his crimes of mockery. The leader of the Wall religion called out angrily. Izuku stayed calm throughout the entire thing as he wanted to make himself appear as calm as well as completely neutral to this endeavor as possible. Alright, what does the defendant have to say about his situation? Zackley asked, looking towards Izuku's expressive green eyes. Sir, as much as I would love to become a human experiment for the military police. Izuku started before spitting out human experiment with venom. I would much rather use the power I have, to reclaim the land we had lost to the Titans. I know that I cannot be trusted, not after what I showed during the reclamation of Trost district. But please know that I do not intend to destroy all of humanity with it, I only want there to be peace within the walls and possibly help reclaim the territory lost to the Titans themselves. If I were to be placed in the Scout Regiment, I could be placed under the watchful gaze of Captain Levi, and he would ultimately decide whether or not I should live or die. He has the pure skill as well as power to kill me in my Titan form should I do anything that isn't what I would do as a Titan. Izuku said, as Zackley nodded before looking at a paper report. From what I have read on this report from some of your cadets within your year of graduation, a young woman by the name of Sasha Browse has been seen capable of dealing with your Titan's abilities. From what these reports say, you called her out in your Titan form and allowed her to cut you out of your Titan form during the excursion of Trost. Do you have anything to say about that? Zackley asked Izuku. When I had become a Titan, I had no idea how long it had been since I could vaguely feel my arms and legs moving about Trost. It wasn't until I heard noises coming from nearby that I saw a group of cadets standing on a rooftop when I approached them. It's still not clear what happened, but from what Connie Springer and Sasha Browse told me, since I was still out of it during the time I had called out to her in my Titan form because I was getting overheated. I wanted some fresh air and struggled trying to move some of the armor around the nape of the Titan's neck, and she cut some of the muscle fibers in the area, allowing me to pull it off, and she found me stuck inside. She pulled me out, allowing me to cool down from being inside the Titan form itself. It was really hot and humid inside of it, and I couldn't take it anymore at that exact moment. Izuku informed as Zachary nodded along. It also says here that you willingly transformed into your Titan form and moved a giant boulder that was within Tros to plug up the wall. Is this also true? Zachary asked, as Izuku gave a nod. I see. Well, I don't see why I can hold this trial any further, as I have reached a verdict. Zachary said, causing some discourse within the courtroom. Quiet. He yelled, slamming his small hammer on the pad. Under my authority of Premier Commander of the military, I sentence Midoriya Izuku to serve under Captain Levi and Commander Erwin Smith in the Scout Regiment. He is to undergo experiments to figure out how much more powers he possesses, as well as how he can utilize them in order to reclaim Wall Maria and Shiganshina district. If he shows any signs of wishing to betray humanity, then by all means is Captain Levi to kill Midoriya Izuku before he can even leave the area he would be in currently. This court is adjourned. Time to see what Eren Jaeger has to offer for his Titan powers. Zachary muttered at the end before exiting the room into the other courtroom. Izuku sat there with the metal pole still attached to his chains as he felt tears brim to the surface before placing his head on the ground. He had a feeling that he would be dead by the end of the court case, but now that he was placed under the control of the Scout Regiment, specifically Commander Erwin Smith as well as Captain Levi, he knew that he would finally be safe for a while. Whilst Commander Erwin and Captain Levi had left the room to move on to the other one, Izuku was approached by Sasha, who was in the courtroom with the scouts, as she helped him out of his cufflinks. That was very brave of you, Izuku. I hope you will be much braver later on. Sasha said, as Izuku nodded as he felt the cufflinks break off from his hands. As soon as the two left the courthouse, they walked down the road as Izuku pulled out some regiment funds he had on him before looking at Sasha. Want to have that dinner with me? Izuku asked, as Sasha smiled at him. You're buying, obviously. She said, as Izuku laughed a little, pulling her in for a side hug. The girl leaned into the hug as they walked down the road, completely unaware of someone else watching them from afar on top of a roof. As the person lowered the hood on their head, it was revealed to be Annie Leonhardt as the girl stared at the boy with a slight sadness in her heart. She had become close to him over the last 3 years of training in the Cadet Corps, and she couldn't bring her heart to try and hurt the young man after he had managed to survive a court case that was hell-bent on killing him. I can't do this for Reiner. I will wait until I can get Eren out of the scouts and bring him back to Marley, that way we could have the coordinate. She muttered before leaving. Prelude to the 57th expedition. As soon as Levi and Izuku had returned from their training, they soon found Eren talking to his old friends from the 104th Cadet Corps who had arrived. Izuku saw Sasha as the girl was seemingly searching for someone, and as he walked up behind her, he poked her shoulder from behind, causing the girl to turn around to see him standing there with Captain Levi. Izuku. She called out, as the girl pulled Izuku into a hug. Izuku, who was being squeezed tightly in her embrace, slowly pulled his arms around her body as he melted into the hug. It was something he was wishing for over the last few weeks since being in the Scout Regiment without her as well as their friends. As the others noticed Izuku's presence, they all ran over and pulled the young man, with Sasha by the way, into a large embrace that allowed him to melt even further into it. He was starting to become more antsy lately since he was not receiving a lot of social interaction with those who were around his age. The group had all then looked at one another as they all stated that they would celebrate that the group was back together after all the trials and tribulations. Izuku had noticed that Reiner and Bertolt were looking at him warily since he was a Titan shifter similar to Eren. Izuku knew that he wasn't the armored Titan that had taken down Wall Maria, but he still had nightmares that everything he was living through at the moment was not something he could understand and was just that a dream. The group of cadets had gotten their capes and wore them around the base as they all would get rest before their training as scouts would begin the next morning. Erwin was standing near his window in the office he had as he looked back at his desk holding the next formation he would use for the mission for the scouts. I surely hope that the new cadets within the scouts will survive this excursion into the outer walls. Our mission is to see if there are any other Titan shifters within our walls, who bear the mission to cause havoc as well as mayhem. I surely hope that if we were to meet a female Titan, she could give us all the information about where Titans come from. Erwin said, as he stared at the formation in order to find the best place to put Levi's squad. The night continued on as Izuku was seen walking around the base in nothing but his cape and some undergarments as he took in the nighttime air. Breathing into his hands he watched as the sun went down over the horizon as he took in the light that the moon gave him. Everything was just as appealing as it was in the morning light, but it just seemed to become that much better since it was not as clear as morning. He let out a sigh as he thought about the next upcoming expedition outside the walls that were sure to come about. He never noticed how Levi was walking around the area and found him standing outside all alone without anyone being nearby to see him. Levi walked over to Izuku and stood next to him. Izuku felt a familiar presence next to him but didn't let it show on his face. "What are you doing out here, Midoriya? Aren't you supposed to be in bed?" Levi questioned as Izuku continued to look at the horizon. "Just stargazing, sir. I wanted to be out here for when the stars would soon come out. I've always loved looking at the stars with my mother when I was little. They were small little things in the sky. But when looking closely at them on a microscope in the world that I lived in before appearing here they were just so big. We are nothing but insignificant beings living in a wider universe. That not even we could explore the stars at this time. My world was on the cusp of exploring the stars before quirks became a constant on Earth. When quirks first appeared on my version of Earth, everyone stopped what they were doing in order to explore just what quirks could do. Once that happened, they just created a new job where people of Earth could just be heroes as a job. I guess what I'm saying is that if this is a time before that happened, I really hope that we make a ship that could explore the stars. Instead of being a hero, learning about the universe is something that I wish I could do," Izuku said, before pulling his cape closer to himself as he walked away from his captain. As Levi stood there looking to the stars, he thought about Izuku's new dream of exploring the stars of space and looking to the sky for the next adventure of his own. Smiling to himself he thought about a future where he could become an astronaut like Izuku talked about, but stopped himself since this was reality, not a dream. He would walk back towards the scout base unaware that Erwin had been nearby hearing the small conversation between the two short stacks. So he came from another world to our own. I will need to make sure that things are better here than there. We still need him here to help us explore the Earth. I certainly hope that he isn't given a chance to return back to his world sooner rather than later," Erwin said, as he thought about the mission of the scouts. Adventure time. Seeds of doubt. It has been a few months since Izuku had last met with Erwin as the young man was seated on his horse within the edge of Kalanath district. He was sitting on the horse that was designated to himself who was aptly named Casa, named after the Casa Blanca lily, that was found on swamps within the walls. Izuku though called the horse Lily since it was a short abbreviation of her full name. She was the same colors as the plants for her hide. She was white on the upper portions of her body with the brown resembling the dirt of the ground it was laid within. There was some splotches of green paint that Izuku had placed in the past in order to really sell the fact that she was named after the plant. Some over the horse's shoulder as well as lower legs as they looked more like stems of a flower of a lily. But beside that, Izuku was looking around at the other scout regiment men who were surrounding him and Squad Levi as they looked around themselves as well. Izuku took notice that Eren was staring at a group of kids looking at them with shock-filled happiness that reminded Izuku about the stories he'd heard from Mikasa about how Eren looked at the scouts as if they were gods amongst men to the young man's dismay. But as Izuku stared at the two children, he found himself looking at them with fondness in his eyes, and as he was looking at the two a small but quick memory replaced the two of the kids with himself and a faceless boy with explosive ash-blonde hair. "Come on, Deku. We need to make sure that we see All Might. He's getting interviewed in the city." The ash blonde called out, as Izuku's much smaller form ran after him. Wait up Kaken. The younger version of himself said, as the smaller boy had run after the slightly taller boy. Izuku sat there staring off into the distance when he was brought back into the mission as one of the leading members of the scouts yelled out. Alright everyone. We are here to reclaim the wall that was lost to us all. Make sure that you are ready. We are taking off in 2 minutes. The man said, as Izuku prepared himself mentally for heading outside the walls. As soon as the time limit was surpassed, Erwin had pulled his arm into the air as he showed his singular blade within the ODM gear's gripper. All forces advance. Erwin called out, as everyone had left the safety of Kalanath district and out into the outer portions of Wall Rose as a whole. Izuku rode within Squad Levi's group as he kept an eye out for titans that were closing in on their location within the formation. And sure, enough, a titan had broken its way into the formation at the start and was making its way to the entire formation as a whole. Alright guys, make sure that you stay on course and don't stop. Levi said, as they all sped up. With them increasing their speed in order to leave the safety of the buildings near the wall, the titan was accosted by some of the scouts who had entered battle with it. Not much longer, the group had soon arrived at the outer rim with Mishi standing at the edge of the small edge of the town. Alright, Squad Levi, you know the drill. Get to where Erwin wishes for you all to be located. Mishi said, as he looked over the small town as well as other cadets leaving the town. With everyone that was accounted for out of there, Izuku stayed near Levi as they made their way through the landscape that was bound to be filled with titans large and small. He was also beginning to feel worried about Sasha as the young woman was close to him as it already was. He was also thinking of her as his girlfriend as of late. He knows that the date they had sealed that portion of his fate. But he couldn't help but worry about the girl he likes being killed by a titan, and he wouldn't know about it until the expedition had ended. He and Levi's squad had been riding for a few hours at this point, and they were nearing a massive forest from what it seemed to look like in the distance. Izuku had not been happy with the fact that they'd have to move through the forest since it was the perfect place for ODM gear to be used, but at the same time titans can use the trees for cover as well. All in all, the forest of giant trees was the perfect playground for both humans and titans as a whole. But for some reason Izuku felt the hairs on the back of his neck were becoming raised, and as he looked around the area for what was causing him to feel this way, Levi had taken notice. So, it seems she's shown herself. The man muttered, just loud enough for his entire squad to overhear him. What do you mean, she's shown herself, Captain? Petra asked. It means exactly what I believe it means, the female titan has finally shown itself. And we are going to head over to that forest to draw her out. Levi said, as he increased the speed his horse was running at. Everyone followed his lead, although Izuku strayed near the back of the group as he kept looking around the area. It got to the point where the rest of the squad had noticed Izuku's very defensive expression he was showing, not to mention that all the hair on his body seemed to be standing on end. Midoriya-kun, what is going on? Why are you looking tenser than usual? ELD asked, looking concerned. We're not alone out here. I don't know how I can tell, but I can just tell, no feel as if we're not alone out here. Izuku said, as the man got the message. Everyone then noticed a mass of black smoke to their right, and Aaron had become distraught with what that entailed. Lieutenant Treyer reporting. The entire right flank of the formation has been compromised. Titans had appeared out of nowhere and completely annihilated it. The commander called out, as Levi nodded. Petra, send that message to Erwin. Everyone else moved back to their previous stations. Levi demanded as they all listened. As soon as the lieutenant had left the area, the group had squeezed closer together as they rode as fast as they could towards the forest of giant trees. On the other side of the formation a few minutes earlier, we find Armin riding his horse without much in the way of himself. It was actually calming for himself as he rode through the vast countryside without a care in the world whilst staying on guard. Not too far behind him, two commanding officers within the scouts were talking to one another before taking notice of a titan that was making their way closer to them. But there was definitely something off about it. It was completely feminine in nature as well as had short blonde hair and blue eyes. But the more confusing part about it, was that it was running towards them with a speed that rivaled their horses. But as soon as they could react to it, the Titan had somehow managed to catch up to them, causing them to move away from the Titan but stay close to it. Noticing that it was moving in the direction of Armin, they nodded towards one another before preparing to attack the Titan themselves, unaware of their audience watching them in horror. The two teamed up in order to skillfully take it down, and as they closed in on the Titan's nape, the white bandana-wearing man sliced his swords onto the nape. But something happened that brought his mind to a screeching halt. His blades broke on contact with the nape, and he watched as there was a blue crystalline formation over the nape. Before he could analyze the situation completely, his wire was grabbed by the Titan as the Titan had flung him towards the ground, with his ally being killed mercilessly in the same way. Armin, who had been watching from afar without having to be in their way, had looked on in terror. Turning his horse around to run as fast as possible away from the Titan itself, he started to run through everything in his mind about that battle. There's no way that Titan is an abnormal. They wouldn't protect their nape like that. If anything, that Titan is like Eren, like Izuku. It's intelligent. Armin came to the conclusion as he heard the sounds of footsteps above him. Craning his head upwards, Armin would never admit this aloud, but he would no longer need to use the bathroom as he saw the Titan staring at him with a mirth in its eyes before slamming the foot down in front of his horse, sending him flying off of it. As he tumbled on the ground rolling around, he had accidentally pulled the hood over his face as he laid on the ground trying to gain his bearings. He froze in place when he felt the ground tremble around himself as he felt the presence of the Titan above him. As soon as he looked to his left, he found the head of the Titan staring at him from the side with a sideways glance, and he felt his hood coming off of his head, revealing his dark golden locks of hair. Once it was shown that he was not what the Titan was seemingly looking for, it stood back up and prepared to leave. And as soon as it started to run in the direction he was originally riding towards, Armin sat there with the most confused look on his face. It had looked at my face. Why? Armin questioned aloud. Not much longer Armin was found by Reiner and Jean as they had noticed him without his horse. Armin. You shouldn't be on the ground without your horse. Come on, we need to see what that Titan's doing. Reiner said, as Armin nodded wordlessly. Climbing on top of the secondary horse, he and Reiner had ridden with Jean as they were following the Titan. So anything we should know about this Titan, other than the fact that she looks absolutely secretary? Reiner questioned, specifically glaring at its butt. All I know is that there is a human inside of that Titan. We need to make sure that it doesn't find who it's looking for. From what I experienced from it, it is looking for someone. But the most standout thing about it has intelligence like Eren and Izuku's Titan forms. Armin said, as Reiner grunted in exasperation. Jean had been quiet the entire time as he growled in silence. It wasn't much longer before they all decided to come up with a plan to buy time for who it was looking for. Armin had surmised that it's looking for either Izuku or Eren, since the other two are the only ones who have been able to transform into Titans thus far. And as soon as the group of three had fought the Titan, they were doing their job of holding it off for as long as they could. Armin had been launched off his horse once again. Like seriously, is that all that's going to happen to him today? Jean had gone in for an attack as he tried to find a spot to attack the nape, but the female Titan had blocked his way of attacking. And he was endlessly going to swing around until he ran out of gas or was killed by the Titan, and as the Titan prepared to kill Jean, Armin had screamed out at him. Avenge the fool Jean. Armin had screamed out, glaring at both Jean and the female Titan. What? Jean questioned as he stared in shock. Get revenge for her killing Eren. He was in the right flank of the formation. All the Titans brought in from the flank on the right completely annihilated the right flank of the formation. Armin called out, remembering his conversation. If she is searching for Eren, where would he be? I had him in the right flank for my map. Reiner called out, as Armin thought about it. What are you talking about? Mine had Eren and Squad Levi within the left flank. Jean stated back, entering the conversation as they planned on how to take down the Titan. Wait, What if he's not in those exact spots? What if he's in the safest spot within the formation? Armin questioned as both young men looked at him. What are you talking about? Jean asked, as Reiner was quiet. Think about it, where is the safest position within the formation we were all given? Armin asked, as Jean realized it as well. The center rear of the formation. They would be safe there since they are surrounded by all forms of scouts on every single side. Jean exclaimed. With that information known between the three of them, they initiated their attack. When the Titan froze in its tracks, she had a lost look in her eyes as she waited to do something about her mission. As Jean was able to finally let go of the female Titan's nape, he flew down and landed near a tree where he could get that near-death experience out of his mind for the moment as he stared at the Titan in question in fear. Not much longer after he did that though, Reiner had run up past Armin as he attacked the female Titan as he flew towards her nape for the easy kill. But as soon as he came close to her shoulder, the Titan had moved her head to look at him with a sadistic smile on her face as Reiner had looked at her in slight fear but determined to finish his goal. He was caught in the air as he stared at the Titan as it started to increase her grip on his body, seemingly deciding that squishing him between her hand was the correct option. As soon as Reiner felt his entire body feeling as if his own internal organs were going to be blown out of his body, he managed to pull up a blade and slice into the hand. But for Armin and Jean, it seemed that the female Titan had squished him in her hold, and it looked that way for a few more moments. Staring in shock as well as utter sadness about their friend's supposed death at the hand of the female Titan, something happened to bring their faith back. Reiner had sliced through the fingers of the female Titan and spun around in the air, breaking his blades in the process. Graha! He cried out, Titan all over his face as well as hair. Landing near Armin, he grabbed the young man and headed over towards Jean in order to get as far away from the female Titan as possible. As he ran away with Armin, the young man looked over the shoulder of Reiner as he watched the female Titan look at her hand, then stand back up and look in the direction of the center rear of the formation, at least roughly where it was located. Wait, that's in the general direction of the center rear of the formation. How does she even know to look in that direction? Armin questioned in his mind before looking back at Reiner. Reiner. We need to stop her. She's going in the direction where the center rear of the formation is located. Armin called out, as Reiner gave a point of his own. How are we supposed to catch up to her as we are now? We lost our horses. We're stuck out here without any form of transportation. Reiner said, as Armin quickly shut up. Izuku looked off in the direction of where he felt the danger coming towards them, its speed farther increased. He increased the speed of his own horse as he thought about why he was feeling a sort of danger being increased the closer they got to the forest of giant trees. Anything you wish to share, Midoriya? Levi questioned as he looked back at Izuku. I'm getting a weird sense of danger the closer we get to the forest, sir, that's all. Izuku said, as they reached the outer portion of the forest. Not far from where they were located, a certain female Titan looked over in Izuku's direction and she smirked to herself as she saw her prize staring in her general direction from the tree line.